session, which is focused on tourism. I should have said before that that panel was produced in partnership with the World Economic Forum, so thank you to Matthew for that cooperation. The next session is in collaboration with the UN World Tourism Organization, which is a major global body representing tourism authorities around the world. Now, tourism is a key sector of 90% of least developed countries and is a crucial source of income for these countries and accounts for nearly 10% of the GDP of LDCs and provides a similar share of employment. I'm very sorry, panelists, I'm going to have to ask you to move off the stage to make room for the next session. To lead this session that will talk about the promotion of tourism investments in the LDCs, we will have as our moderator Mr. Miguel Angel Figueroa, I hope I'm not murdered your name too badly, who is a principal for innovation, investments, and digital transformation at the UN World Tourism Organization. So I will hand over to Miguel now to introduce his panelists and lead his session.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for sticking with us. I know it's the hardest time ever, but you might be hungry. So let's try to make it fast and sweet, okay? First, let's give like a little words for remarks. Dashan, can you help me to wrap it up and give the remarks from WIPA, please?
Thank you so much, Miguel. I'll make 7 key quick points here. We are obviously, talking about tourism investments. First, 212 days from now, on 13th of December 2023, Bhutan is going to migrate from the LDC status. It is going to move out. Now, obviously, hydroelectric energy and other sectors have been mentioned, but tourism investments, again, I believe plays a very key role as Bhutan moves out from the LDC status. What does that tell us? Tourism investments, again, is something which clicks all the boxes when we talk about sustainability. We're talking about economic growth, we're talking about community development, and we're talking about environmental protection. So that's the second point I wanted to talk about. Third, again, when we go back, we as WIPA were there at Doha at the LDC5 conference. And again, tourism was sort of brought out as one of the key pillars at the LDC5 conference. I would urge the LDCs who are here to look at tourism, but also look at, connected sectors or areas such as creative economy. When we talk about creative economy, we are actually talking about things such as monuments. We're talking about museums. We're talking about archaeological sites. We're talking about festivals, public parks. You can very clearly see how much of a close correlation is there between tourism and the creative economy. And I can tell you all the global multilaterals are focusing so much on the creative economy. We're looking at, UNCTAD, which is focusing on the creative economy network, UNESCO, which is talking about creative cities network. So again, this would be my 4th point. The 5th point, as IPAs, and we are all trying to attract tourism investments. Let's be clear about it. Till the time the ecosystem is not very comfortable and convenient for investors, they're not going to come in. We tell an investor to come in and set up, let's say, a property, and we end up taking, let's say, a couple of years just giving him the approvals and clearances. It is not going to happen. So let's assume that as far as the base of investment ecosystem, it has to be really comfortable and convenient for investors, and that's where, there is a good amount of work which is required by all the, IPAs which are present here. The 6th point is about projects. When we are talking about tourism investments, investable projects can clearly be the way to go, because we are really also looking at PPP investments to come in. And when we talk about that, again, institutional investors, again, this is, the one bucket of money which is available. And as you would have moved around AIM, been in and out of sessions, there's one point which you will realize that there is money out there. The investors have the money. You present relevant projects to them. You present bankable projects. You will get those investments that you really need. Last point, again, is about the last mile. The last mile experience is where the difference comes. And again, at the same point, it is important for us as IPS to get an outside-in view. How do those guys, we believe what we are giving is the best, but how do the outsiders look into it? So again, as VIPA, we are very excited and glad that, we are having this session today on such an important topic, which is on tourism investments. And, we have UNWTO, who's also the consultative committee partner of VIPA, who's, been there in this journey with us. With that, I'll again like to hand over back to Miguel to take it on from here, please.
Thank you, Dash. The purpose of this forum, or this session, is to promote these frameworks for tourism investments. So we will give the floor now to Natalia Bayona, who is the Director of Innovation, Education, and Investment at the UNWTO. So she will give her remarks, but then we will have a presentation just to have like a big picture of what we are talking about, what is tourism investments, and then we'll have our last panel, and it's really cool because the panel is just full of ladies. So I am really proud that will happen. So let's play the video, please. Thank you. We have like some little technical issues. Let's move forward with the presentation, please. So let's set the scene for tourism investments. Okay, so before I give the floor to my panel, and for the brave people that are staying in the lunchtime, let's show what we are talking about, okay? Do you remember these couple of rough years we have when we have these empty roads, when we have these beautiful places and we were in the lockdowns, when we couldn't travel, when we couldn't see friends and family? It looks so far away, but it was just happened, right? And we take it for granted. So a couple of days ago, the World Health Organization said that we are not longer in this emergency phase. But we should be cautious all the time because there are so many variants and so many uncertainties during this time. But these are good news, right? But what happened during these years? And I just want you to picture this as a first question for this panel, because as you can tell, there is some scenarios. These are not projections, are scenarios of how time will take to recover fully from tourism and from the last high peak that we had. So from the pandemic, we have like almost 85% decrease of international tourists. But the first question for the panel and for this session is like, what have we learned during this time, right? And the other question is like, what can we do differently in terms of improve, in terms of strategies, in terms of promoting investments and diversifying these sectors. And this is important because the LDC countries are the most vulnerable. In average, almost 10% of the GDP are represented by tourism. And in some countries, especially in the island, small island countries, that is not 10%. It could be up to 85% in some cases. So this is really, really important because these countries are relying on natural resources and natural assets. And tourism sometimes is looked at as the least developed sector, but it's one of the most powerful sectors. So let me show you some of the examples. Last year we were working with Tanzania, if there is anybody from Tanzania here. And we were doing some research, we were helping with their investment strategy, and there is about 16% of the GDP of Tanzania is represented in tourism. All the subsector combined represents almost 17% of the GDP of the mainland and the archipelago. But if you, the people that know Tanzania better, there's an archipelago called Zanzibar, right? And there is almost 55% of the GDP that are relying on tourism. So that is a lot, especially for these beautiful islands. And combined is almost 1 million people that are relying on these jobs from tourism. And this is important because once you understand the scope of the subsectors of tourism and how they are tied to the SDGs, the impact is really, really powerful. And if you see the LDC categorization from the UN, they have 3 different kind of risks, right? Like the human kind of risk and vulnerabilities, the income, and the economic and environmental vulnerabilities. So what does this mean for tourism? This means that tourism is such a powerful sector because it represents 1 out of 10 jobs globally, and that represents $1.7 trillion on economic power for GDP. So just picture that number when we went into lockdowns, there were about $1.3 trillion that was wiped out. It's really hard to understand that. I personally saw that because we were visiting Cabo Verde, and it was really hard to see the people that were, relying on tourism in that moment, and they didn't literally have anything besides like fishing. So for me, this is kind of like setting the space for this panel because I personally don't come from the tourism sector, but once I start researching on this, is very, very important. For instance, one of the data is that, a personal insight is that tourism is such an intensive labor sector, meaning that there is a lot of people. You cannot exchange or change a smile and replace it with a robot. There is a lot of people that are working behind it. Most of the people that get their first job is in tourism. In the OECD, it's about 60% of people under 35, but in other developing countries is more than that. Another characteristic of the tourism is the contribution to exports is the 3rd largest globally. If you put it in perspective, it's really, really interesting to understand the powerful of that. The other big insight for me is that tourism is very elastic. There are different subsectors within the tourism. There are about 18. There is different activities, but the challenge with that is that it's hard to measure the capital formation on tourism because they are intertwined. Every coffee that you drink here in a coffee, if you're a foreigner, is an export for the country, but it's really hard to measure in terms of capital. And then, of course, because there is a value chain, there is so many SMEs, like 85% about it, from the sector or the subsector, so the impact of the tourism is really powerful. Most of the times we analyze tourism just from the hospitality and the hotel perspectives, but there's food and beverage, there is financial services, there is travel, tech and mobility. There's different subsectors that, of course, they are less and more important than others, but this is something that we need to consider when we are talking about investments, right? Because not just the hardcore infrastructure. The last point of the many is that it's the most human-centered sector, right? Even though we are talking about artificial intelligence and so many technologies, it's really hard to replace this warmth from you, right? When you have these meetings, when you are exchanging a business card, when you have a hack, is really hard, right? So this is something that we need to improve, and we need to do that through different means of training people and creating jobs of quality. So this is the big picture. And this is important as a long introduction because when you see the data of investments, if you don't understand the nature of tourism, it's really hard to develop specific strategies on this. So as I was saying, there is very few information on capital formation for tourism, and one of them is the greenfield investments on the hotels and accommodations. As you can tell, there is almost $180 billion that has been invested from 2017 to 2022. And even though that it grew 58%, as you can tell, from 2020, in other words, in 21, grew 58%, we are still 84% down from the high peak of investments. So this is a lot. This is a lot of money that hasn't, go to the markets, and a lot of projects that were stopped for the pandemic, a lot of infrastructure, a lot of value chains, a lot of businesses that actually stopped from this. And the question is, how can we recover fast from this, or what can we do differently? Then if you go deeper in this data, most of this information are greenfield investments on accommodations and hotels. But then there's I don't know if you can see there's a 25% of software and ITC diversification. This number, since I joined the UNWTO almost 3 years ago, it was 17%. So that means that the tourism sector is diversifying in terms of investments. And since I come from the private sector and I'm more related to the venture capital, I went down to that rabbit hole and I identified the capital that is being invested in tourism, especially in the travel tech sector, is about $500 billion from 2017. So what does this mean? It means that the tourism sector is really powerful. It goes beyond the infrastructure, and there is also this space for digital infrastructure that is being built, right? So if you can tell here from 2020, the investments are constant. The numbers of deals are smaller, but the amount of money is being almost constant, even though despite of the pandemic. And this is super important to understand because if you allow me here, from the investor perspective, you invest for these deals for the next 7 to 10 years when you structure a fund. That means that these investments, as you can see here, are going to have profits in the next 5-7 years. So this is really, really important to show because it means that the sector is maturing and there is also diversification down the road, okay? So what is next? Now talking about the strategies on this. There is several research that from the UNWTO has been done, even previous to the pandemic, and this is like a profiling of the new consumer kind of behavior, right? So there is a lot of information and there is a lot of trends on how the consumers are more sustainable, more digital, they like more experiences. So let me share with you some of those so we will go deeper. The consumer will be more this generation millennials and the generation Zs, and that will represent a new big demand. What does that mean? That means that these people are already digital. Most of them are already with the mobiles, right? With the mobile phones, they don't book through the websites already. Everything is, or some of them are already into Web3 as well. And this is also important to understand how we are attracting different different tourists to our destinations. Most of these people will be coming also from Asia. There's a huge demand from Asia based on the data that we are foreseeing as well. And there is also a huge opportunity here, right? Since tourism is labor intensive, is resource based, there's opportunities, as you can hear from the other panel, on ESG investments and frameworks, on climate finance, right? I will give some examples on that, and especially on innovation in technology for startups. As you can see, another example for this in the innovation sector, just disregard this big heat map with the big squares, because those are the ones that are already invested in the last 10 years. Just try to focus on the small ones there, because those are the ones that will be the niche for the next 5-7 years of investments. So there are different pockets of investments that the investors are looking at. Just to give an example, for instance, BR, food and beverage, like event management, like companies like Zoom that came to be a big valuation for the last years. For instance, as you can tell from the pandemic, in some point Zoom reached a market cap as big as the 15 biggest airlines combined because they were being, using with the webinars. So that is really impressive. But as Zoom, there were other kind of pockets of innovations that, as I was telling you, you can start checking. And this is important, especially for the LDC countries, because they are resource-based. You can start looking at food and beverage. You can start looking at energy. For instance, especially in the ESG standards, there is different innovations that can be done as well in the space, right? There is a lot of hype on the Web3 and the NFTs, remember? And it sounds like a trend, really something simple, but if you go deeper into the examples, there are some case studies. In some cases, for instance, there was like Giselles, they were using NFTs to mint NFTs to raise money for conservation finance, for example, or this case for Travelad that are working with loyalty programs, or to trace the passport for the visas, or different kind of opportunities. But this is just starting. Besides the hype, I think the technology behind this it'll be a new opportunity. The influence of artificial intelligence as well. Many people are saying like we are going to be replaced by these robots, but I mean it's so impactful. How can we use this information to actually strengthen the value chain of tourism? So, as a summary, before I introduce my panelists, there are three main things that I will want to discuss with you today, if you allow me. One is the issue of governance. We work with 160 countries at the UNWTO, and all of them are competing for investors, right? Everybody is saying, like, can you help us to find investors? And everybody is trying to define their value proposition, and so forth and so on. And few of these countries have it clear in terms of the governance, in terms of the mandate of how you do that, right? Do they have like right frameworks for investments? Do they have the right mandate and such and such? So this is important to understand how you do this better. The second point is the innovation and technology, that we should leverage that in order to create these value propositions. And the third one, and the most important for the LDC countries, is sustainability, right? That is kind of our bigger pool of leverage. Just to give you an example, in Tanzania last year, since they have such a big resources in terms of natural resources, safaris, lodges, natural parks, they were looking more than investors to donors, and we switched the mentality and we say like, are you familiarized with conservation finance or with climate finance? Can we structure different methodologies, different incentives, different frameworks to attract these kind of investors that are more institutional focused on conservation finance? And we invited people from the UK, and there are different projects that are actually focusing on these kind of natural parks and resorts that have these ESG kind of standards. So my point here is that there's a lot of opportunities, and I would love to discuss that with you, and that's why we have the last panel of the day. I will introduce, and it's a privilege to me because they all are ladies, so this is beautiful because in the investment world, most of the people are men, sadly, and it will be intimidating for me, so bear with us. So I would like to invite to the stage to Sumega Sugant, Assistant VP at Invest India, Josaili, sorry, I'm messing up your names, Rafidi, she's the Director General at EDB Madagascar, Diana Koyutaye, Managing Director at APA Guinea, and Sarah Payne, Director of Impact at UNTUR's Foundation from the States. Thank you so much. So it's, again, a privilege to have you, all of you here. So let me start with Sumega first. Since you are from India, and since India, of course, is not an LDC, but it's actually a G20 country, what are the best practices to promote India, or that you use to promote India as a tourist destination? Can you share something with us? Yeah.
Is it better?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I think we should begin with a huge round of applause first for all the women who are working feverishly for the tourism industry and the evangelists for their own countries. So, I mean, that shows the power and the kind of contribution the women are making in the tourism industry. Thank you, Miguel, and to the entire UNWTO team for giving me and us the opportunity. I would not take much time, but before I begin, I would like to share with my colleagues here that I'll be wearing 3 hats today. One of my former role as the social media head of Incredible India. Incredible India is the international tourism campaign of the Ministry of Tourism, Government of India. And I'm sure all of you must have heard some point in your lifetime the signature tune, the beautiful melodious one saying, Incredible India. So yes, Incredible India has been one of the biggest tourism campaigns ever launched in the history of tourism. So while I have much more wisdom to share in the next round of discussion, today I am wearing the cap of, Invest India official. And the third hat is the most important one. As you all know, Invest India is holding the presidency for WIPA. Gives me an opportunity to share the practices that India is using to share with all of you. Because my colleagues here from LDCs, please do, my assurance to you on one thing is, what you see and perceive India today wasn't the country that we have grown up into. So there are quite a few things that the Indian government has done right, and which is making India, if not today the most preferred destination, but at least I can say very confidently that it is a considered tourism destination in the world today. So up until I think a couple of decades back, we used to feel that, if a tourist sitting 2,000 miles away is booking a ticket, applying for visa, and coming and arriving into the country is that successful transaction for the country when they calculate the international tourist arrivals that my colleague Miguel just shared on the screen. Today is not the case. I think the realization that the government had of understanding that, once a tourist arrives in your country, that person becomes the most important stakeholder for you. Why? Because if you give that person the experience of a lifetime as a tourist in your country, that person goes back to their home country and becomes your evangelist. So all the money that you spend on marketing yourself as the most preferred tourism destination is not the only thing that works in your favor. You have to give that experience to your tourists as well. Now, because I know my colleagues are from IPAs, I would now like to share how Invest India is helping the government of India in achieving that thing. If you work, so I know one thing for sure, even though I do not work with my the desk that is dedicated to Ministry of Tourism, but I know enough the kind of work that they are doing. They are building an entire ecosystem, a tourism ecosystem. So if I am today stationed at Ministry of Tourism, simplifying their processes to seek investments or strengthening ease of doing business, I am also working with the Ministry of Civil Aviation to consult, the Ministry of Tourism to let them know that, you have to encourage people sitting 2,000 miles away to simplify the visa process. Now your tourist is in your country. How many of you know, and I know my colleague SG was here from VIPA last year, how many of you know Taj Mahal, which is in Agra, is just a 3-hour drive away from Delhi, the capital city of India. This was the first historic moment for India for simplifying our road and transport system. I can very confidently say that 60% of India is like that today. It wasn't the case 5 or 7 years back. Please take my word for that, and you can speak to my colleague SG also. It's so seamless. Once you are in India today, you will see a different picture. But it only came as a realization that, you have to build the entire ecosystem. So my IPA colleagues from Invest India are penetrated into all the ministries. They are the real brains behind it, with ministry being the hand and the legs. And we work feverishly with the government to make all the processes simpler. So I think with that, I would like to just conclude my part on this question by saying that, I understand not every IPA has a workforce just like Invest India, but we have to think and, put ourselves into the feet of a tourist who is sitting really far behind, away, and, create that experience for them so that they keep coming again and keep investing, because they are your investors. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Sugamega. Let's continue to Jocelyn. Can we, or can you please share with us, since Madagascar received, I have the data here, 385,000 international tourists previous the pandemic, and it represents about 7.5 of the total exports for your country. What is the impact of tourism in your country? And can you share with us what are those main subsectors that tourism encompass for your country? What are those main subsectors that you see in your country?
Yes. Thank you for giving me the floor, and thank you as well to the WIPA for giving us the opportunity to share about the tourism sector in Madagascar. And I think it's very important for us. And I would like to have to ask a question. Who have been in Madagascar? Who in the audience? Did you visit Madagascar, or have you been in Madagascar? Yes, Comoros. Yes, thank you, thank you. Just Madagascar is definitely recognized by its, the biodiversity and the unique flora and fauna to entice foreign and domestic travel and investment across the country through partnership with leading hotel chains, tour operators, cruise ships, and the likes. I'm sorry for my English, first of all, because I hope that you understand me, but I will try to make this. Thank you. But among tourism sector, did you know that Madagascar is the first producer of the caviar in Africa, for example, as well as the first producer of vanilla? Maybe you know that we are the first producer of vanilla, of cloves, of organic shrimps worldwide. And we are also, among that, a major destination of FDI in textile sector in Madagascar. So I think it's important in terms of the sharing you the country branding and how Madagascar is a destination of investment, definitely. And in terms of tourism, we have various attractions in Madagascar. We have nature and adventure, seaside and nautical. We have water sports and as well outdoor activities. For example, for this year, we had an international competition of kite surf in the north of the country. We have as well authentic culture and cuisine in Madagascar. And probably you don't know, but we share you that Malagasy communities and people are known from our legendary hospitality. So please, if you come to Madagascar and visit, so you can be part of the what should be done in Madagascar. And finally, I would like to share you that Madagascar has been awarded the title of Indian Ocean's leading green destination for 2021 and 2022 of this year by the World Travel Awards in the 29th edition. So this is just an introduction of the Madagascar and what we have in terms of destination, because we are talking about the tourism. And then, accordingly, we have promote national tourism in Madagascar to support as well the local operators in this sector. And we as well promote the destination as an investment promotion in some specific sub-sector from your question. So before that, let's share as well the requirements that we need in Madagascar before talking about the sub-sector, maybe. And the first of all, according to the sectoral policy from the ministry in terms of tourism, our infrastructure should be improved, and we have identified more than 25,000 new rooms because we intend to reach 1 million of tourists by 2028. Sorry. And above that, the aim of the policy is to create as well more than 70,000 new jobs. And accordingly, we need to promote the sector, the sector of the transportation, for example. And we have identified that we need more than 440,000 additional aircraft seats in Madagascar to promote. And in terms of leading subsector for investment, we have some promotion in terms of hotels and lodging, cruise ships, restaurant and hotel industry and equipment. We have as well air transportation, as mentioned. We are on the way to promote, some tourist attraction in the national parks in Madagascar, marinas as well, and eco-lodge. And for sure, we need to promote investment in terms of luxury tourism, because we have, for example, in the north of Madagascar, in the Nusi Bay, we have a direct flight from Italia, which is very fruitful in terms of investment as well. Somewhere as well, we have river cruises that will be developed to circulate into the country, because we have 24 regions in Madagascar, and each region has is specifically in terms of tourism destination. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm taking notes, and your English is good. Don't worry. My English is almost the same. I'm taking notes, and one of the things for me personally, when I started researching about tourism, is the lack of information. Right? Sometimes each country measure capital formation for tourism in different ways, and it's really not a standard to do that. So that is one of the biggest challenges that we find out. And each country does it differently. And also, when you are presenting that information to investors, they will rely on the countries that have more information. So sadly, if your country don't have a clear satellite of indicators of where the investment is, it's very hard to attract and to showcase your country in terms of the international tourist arrivals, in terms of infrastructure, and so on and so on. And the reason I asked you that, Jocelyn, was that the subsectors that you mentioned, for instance, sometimes are also measured by other, or they are part of another subsectors that are very related. So this is something that maybe we can think about it in terms of when you are promoting your strategy for investments. So let me move forward before the time run out. Mrs. Diana, can you share with us what are the opportunities and challenges for your country when it comes to attract tourism investments? Because given, for instance, the increasing amount of investments in your neighbor countries like Cote d'Ivoire, for instance, we were in Cote d'Ivoire 2 years ago, and there are investors that are actually interested, and it's growing. But each country is different. So in your case, what is the opportunities and also challenges and the priorities that you have?
Bonjour à tous, vous m'entendez? Donc, je vais parler en français. Déjà, je voudrais vous remercier ainsi que les organisateurs du WIPA pour cette opportunité, pour parler du tourisme en Guinée. La République de Guinée. Et vous avez parlé de la Côte d'Ivoire, mais en parlant de la Côte d'Ivoire, c'est vrai que la Guinée est connue pour sa production de bauxite. C'est le premier producteur de bauxite au monde. Le tourisme, très peu. Et aujourd'hui, en fait, au niveau de l'État et surtout de l'Agence de promotion des investissements, nous travaillons sur ce tourisme-là, puisque c'est un des secteurs prioritaires dont nous faisons la promotion. L'objectif, comme vous l'avez dit, les opportunités sont là. La Guinée est connue pour être le château d'eau d'Afrique de l'Ouest. Tous les principaux fleuves de l'Afrique de l'Ouest prennent leur source en Guinée. Chacune des régions naturelles a vraiment des spécificités. Vous avez des îles vierges en Guinée. Je pense que moi, je suis guinéenne, donc je connais mon pays. Mais il y a une chose dont on manque, c'est la connaissance des autres, des investisseurs. Et aujourd'hui, on travaille là-dessus, la digitalisation, parce que quand on veut visiter un pays, la première chose qu'on regarde, c'est les opportunités et il faut les faire connaître. Les mécanismes sont mis en place actuellement pour justement rendre la Guinée visible. Nous travaillons sur le branding en termes d'opportunités pour avoir notre marque pays et ça va contribuer à favoriser le tourisme. Avant de parler du tourisme, toujours, il y a des préalables aussi et sur lesquels, au niveau des investissements, nous travaillons, notamment les routes, l'accès aux sites touristiques, puisqu'il y a des zones vraiment enclavées. Et aussi, la grande innovation en termes d'opportunités et surtout de défis, c'est vraiment la méconnaissance de la Guinée. Et cette méconnaissance ne favorise pas le développement du tourisme, malgré ces dernières années une croissance drastique d'infrastructures hôtelières. Il y a des grands groupes qui s'installent aujourd'hui en Guinée, donc la demande est là. Les compagnies aériennes, il y en a plusieurs aujourd'hui qui s'installent. Autant il y a quelques années, on était en situation de monopole. Maintenant, on peut venir en Guinée de partout dans le monde et la Guinée devient accessible. Nous avons un projet de construction, de rénovation, en tout cas d'agrandissement, de l'aéroport de Conakry, l'aéroport international. On devrait passer d'une capacité de 500 000 voyageurs à 3 millions avec un investissement de 200 millions de dollars. Donc, ce qui fait que on est conscient, en tout cas qu'on est en concurrence avec les autres pays de la sous-région, ce qui fait qu'aujourd'hui, on est dans une démarche au niveau de l'agence de promotion sur les avantages comparatifs de la Guinée. Quand on est en concurrence, qu'est-ce qu'on valorise? Et on travaille sur ces filières-là pour justement rendre vraiment la Guinée connue du monde au niveau des investissements, mais aussi du tourisme dans sa globalité. Et enfin, pour finir mon intervention, c'est l'écotourisme. L'écotourisme, aujourd'hui, le potentiel est là. Moi, j'ai la petite expérience, j'ai fait 20 ans en France. Quand je suis revenue en Guinée, je me suis dit, waouh, en fait, je partais dans d'autres pays pour les plages et autres. Mais en fait, chez moi, il y a tout ça. Mais malheureusement, on ne le fait pas assez connaître. Donc aujourd'hui, vraiment, nous travaillons pour faire connaître ce tourisme en Guinée. Merci.
Okay, there's a lot to unpack there, We'll come back there, but just in the case you have missed that or you didn't have the translators, there's the big parts from my notes are the branding positioning of the country, which is really important because at the end of the day, when we travel with the World Tourism Organization, everybody's wondering and asking, introduce me to investors. But at the end of the day, investors, as you can see with the IPAs and the work that you develop with WIPA and UNTAC, there's like a whole process, right? And there is a whole process of identifying the value proposition of your country. And sometimes we ask our member states, what do you need investors for, right? What is the value proposition? What is the mechanisms for investments that you were mentioning? Do you have like a sound business climate on your country that make reliable, information and present reliable information for investors? You were mentioning also about the infrastructure. Sometimes there are places, I don't want to mention names, that the countries have huge concessions of land, but there is not electricity. So if you want to go and invest a huge amount of money for a resort in a X place, there's not a grid, so you can connect with infrastructure. So my point here is that it's a huge opportunity if you define this in a global scale, and then if you work in a regional level to understand the priorities of your country, because the tourism sector could open and de-risk some other investments, right? Especially in infrastructure, when you are connecting with projects of water and sanitation, or you are developing different roads or airports. That's kind of like one of the big points from Ms. Diana. So talking about investors, I will move on to Sarah. Sarah, you are a very specialized foundation focused actually in tourism, right? Can you give us like an example of instruments that you are working on? Because you work, different like the traditional investments of the infrastructure, and given that you are focusing in emerging markets, maybe you can just give us a snapshot of what you're doing, and then we can go deeper. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for that. Can you all hear me?
No. Just, yeah, there.
It's okay? Okay. Thank you for that question. Thank you to WIPA as well as UNWTO for the platform as well. Excited to be with you all today and to share with you. As Miguel mentioned, I work for a foundation called UNTOURS Foundation in the United States outside of Philadelphia. We recently launched a $10 million fund called Reset Tourism Fund, which is all about directing investments to enterprises that are making the future of tourism more sustainable, accessible, inclusive, and community enhancing. So we're really looking at, again, solutions to the climate crisis, social impact, as well as economic development. And specifically, we're directing mission-aligned, flexible, and accessible capital, particularly to SMEs in the tourism industry. So we definitely are, as Miguel mentioned, not traditional investors, looking certainly beyond the very valid needs for infrastructure as well as resource development. But we're particularly looking at the whole value chain of tourism and businesses that really make up the ecosystem, from restaurants to tour operators to small hotels, eco-lodges, again, just the infrastructure that makes up tourism. 80% of tourism businesses are SMEs, and so we're really focused on that area. And to get to the meat of the question, we are mostly providing debt investments, so about 80% of our portfolio historically has been debt. And we generally, try to be the friendliest investor to founders that we can be. So providing, again, very accessible interest rates, so coming in below market, especially compared to commercial lending. We also offer revenue-based financing, specifically in the tourism industry. There's a lot of seasonality, there's ups and downs. So rather than have a fixed interest rate, we offer revenue-based financing. So it's a percentage of your revenue that you pay back to a certain amount, a multiple of the principal investment. So again, another example of us trying to make this investment very accessible. So I think that is a lot of what makes us unique. Also, as a fund, we are trying to provide catalytic capital, which means that it's risk tolerant, that it's flexible, and even concessionary. So as investors, we're really concerned with the social and environmental and local economic impact that we can make through our funding. So again, pretty atypical. And then we also attempt to offer investees additional value add. So our networks, our connections, our foundation also owns a travel company ourselves, so our expertise in the travel industry, as well as helping enterprises to measure and communicate and improve their impact. So hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you. Thank you. Perfect. So there's also a lot of notes from my end here, since I like the investment instruments. For me, it's kind of challenging when you start working on investments on tourism, because again, there is this paradigm of investments in large, big infrastructure, mostly related with greenfield investments and infrastructure. But there is a new set of instruments that came to be in the last 7 years, especially related with climate finance, for instance, and all these ESG frameworks that everybody talks about it, but it's really hard to implement, right? But there are some practical cases. Like there is this case from a firm from the UK. It's called Third Wave, and they are working in an instrument. It's like $500 million. And they are focusing in 5 countries in the sub-Sahara in Africa. And it's interesting, as you mentioned, Sarah, that there are different instruments, and a lot of those are new. They are focused on natural resources, and they have the intersection of the recognizing the assets and to make audits on the biodiversity, but also they have indicators focused on the employability of these, the communities. And there are other funds and experiences in Latin America with the multilateral cooperation like the IDB in LATAM, that they are issuing these thematic bonds in the capital markets related with the oceans, related with conservation, related with gender. So the point that I want to make is that we need to start thinking beyond the traditional greenfield investments and start kind of open up the different worlds to these doors to these new worlds for investors, right? And the ones that you mentioned in another kind of meso micro level are related to debt investments, this value added in terms of the building the ecosystem with the SMEs. It's also powerful because we'll go back to your point about the experiences, because when you are creating this experience with this relationship with the investors, they actually will talk to their colleagues and other investors, and then the word of mouth will be known of your destination and your country, and this is such an important piece when you are positioning your brand, right? So I will go back to your brand because you are a specialist on that. So how do you create these narratives for communicating, because you have such a nice experience when you do, when you work with India in the branding. Can you give us like some ideas there?
Yeah. Most happily, actually. And people somehow tell me all the time that whenever I speak of my experience...
Can you talk, closer to the mic?
So sorry.
Yeah.
Am I audible now?
Thanks.
So people kind of accuse me all the time that, whenever I speak of my experience during my Incredible India days, somehow there is this twinkle sparkle in my eyes. And I think I would agree and accept that, because that has been the most wonderful time of my career so far. Why do I say that? Because I never thought of myself as a marketer while I used to build the community strategies. I always thought of myself as a proud citizen first. So the only key takeaway before I share on the most specific strategies to my colleagues here, when you are promoting your country, please have that kind of conviction about your country so that that can be bought by the people who are looking at you. So you would not need to put in any extra effort, because my colleague Diana sitting here, when she was speaking so highly of Guinea, I could already feel that I would want to travel, She was speaking about the infrastructures, experience, and whatnot. And 2, 3 tangible strategies, if I have to share here, are going to be, if you have nothing right now digitally on your channels, start from scratch, build a very simple Instagram profile. Please don't run after Twitter or LinkedIn because those are professional networks. You need to promote tourism, you need to have a visually appealing platform. And please, you don't have to even go after building real footage. Encourage the citizens of your country to build and incentivize them so that for just $10 or $20, the kind of videos that will be created and will be sent to you and will be published on your page will travel across the globe. And people do really watch it. Digital presence is important. Now, I used to go on live sessions and I used to speak to influencers who work day and night on the ground to promote the tourism products. Miguel, am I allowed to ask a question from the audience?
Sure.
What comes to your mind as a tourism product when you think of India? By tourism product, I mean it could be wildlife, adventure, culture, heritage. So when you think of India, what is that first thing that comes to your mind and why would you want to travel to India? Yeah. Food, nice, yeah. And Taj Mahal, yeah, because we've been promoting it for last 50 years. Does anybody know here that the world's largest statue is in India? World's largest statue is in India, in the state of Gujarat. It's higher than Statue of Liberty. It's called Statue of Unity. Nobody knows that. And you would not believe me that vicinity around Statue of Unity is not a one-day affair, it's a 4-day affair. You have a Zen garden around it, you have butterfly gardens, you have whatnot. The moment you search for Statue of Unity, you would know that you would need to spend 7 days for that. Now, one would think that, for anybody sitting here who is in the tourism department, that their country doesn't have enough to offer. Now you come, you think of me as the social media head for Incredible India. India is such a difficult country to promote because it has everything. Now, whenever we used to speak to the ministry officials, I used to report into the Additional Director General. I used to, my core job used to be to present a campaign calendar for 30 days. Now, you see, India has 36 states and UTs combined. 36 states. Now, for the tourism products, we thrive in rural tourism, we thrive in adventure, we thrive in culture tourism, heritage, whatnot. We have pretty much everything. So 36 states into these 10, 20 products. For a 30-day calendar, I had content for an 180-day calendar. That was my challenge, to fit so much into those 30 days. So the key takeaway here, the reason why I'm sharing this problem is that only focus on those 4 or 5 things that your country is good at. Now, if you think of Kenya, what is that one thing that comes to your mind as a tourist? Wildlife, because you're clear. So if I project India as that cultural destination or heritage destination, one would know that I am traveling to India for that. And before I conclude, I would just want to share one very, personal moment. I was onboarded by the Ministry of Tourism on the day of the lockdown to promote the tourism of India. Can you believe me? It was 6th April, I still remember, and the whole world was at a standstill. Did I see that as an unfortunate moment? Absolutely not. I used it as an opportunity. I know that people are not traveling. Can I tell them to travel? No, but they are sitting at home. Everybody is on social media. So why don't I prepare them to, travel? We can only be hopeful, right? That maybe a year or 2 years later, they would think of traveling. So why don't I give them so much content to think about and make them realize that, okay, India is also a country to travel to. So we went so aggressive with our campaigns digitally, and we had put out pretty much everything there. And today when I see UNWTO's numbers and Ministry of Tourism numbers, even though I'm not a part, I think 2022 was a great year for Indian tourism industry. We had close to about 17 million tourists, if I'm not mistaken. So my colleagues from LDCs, please begin from scratch, have a very simple Instagram profile, encourage your citizens, incentivize them, put it out there, have real interactions with people who are working to promote your tourism every day. They are your real evangelists. So this is what I would want to share.
Okay, we can tell the passion you have for this.
One thing, I'm so sorry, one last thing. And you know what, after working for 2-3 years promoting Incredible India, what I understood about tourism sector, of all the sectors in the world, that it cannot thrive as a product or as an industry, but an emotion. So you have to have that emotion that people can feel about your country.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you. So coming back, because we are running out of time, Jocelyn, based on all of this conversation and also taking the passion about the value proposition, like what are the main priorities, the main opportunities that you have to offer to other investors in the tourism sector? What is the top priorities that you have to offer?
Thank you. So allow me to switch in French if possible, because
Sure.
I didn't TOURISUM. Thank you. Donc en ce qui concerne déjà donc en matière d'environnement des affaires à Madagascar, il faut savoir que Madagascar aujourd'hui est en voie de renforcer, on va dire, le cadre des investissements, de la politique d'investissement à Madagascar, à travers l'adoption de la refonte de la loi sur les investissements, et qui va justement renforcer les standards internationaux au niveau du pays. C'est-à-dire que dans ce cadre-là, nous allons inciter davantage des investissements durables, quels que soient les secteurs. D'un autre côté également, il y aura l'égalité de traitement entre les investisseurs nationaux, donc les investisseurs directs nationaux, et les investisseurs directs étrangers. Nous sommes également aujourd'hui, toujours dans le cadre de l'environnement des affaires, qui vont contribuer à l'attraction d'investissements. Nous sommes en voie de valider également le nouveau code du tourisme à Madagascar, donc, qui va certainement passer prochainement donc, lors de l'Assemblée de la session parlementaire, et qui, une fois de plus, va pousser le secteur du tourisme comme un des secteurs porteurs pourvoyeurs de devises, puisqu'on parle de secteur d'exportation, mais également pourvoyeurs d'emplois, puisque à Madagascar, près de 44 000 emplois sont créés justement dans le secteur du tourisme en termes de générateurs d'emplois au niveau de Madagascar. Ensuite, donc, à Madagascar, donc, la liberté de détenir 100% du capital est vraiment un argument qui continue donc d'attirer des investissements, qui soient donc de nationalité étrangère, donc pour les investisseurs directs étrangers. Et en termes d'incentives, donc d'incitation, nous avons donc une batterie d'incitations fiscales. On n'aura pas le temps de tout définir ici aujourd'hui, mais entre autres, donc, il y a des réductions de taxation, par exemple, de plus de 50%. Par rapport au secteur de l'énergie renouvelable ou à des investissements dans le secteur du tourisme qui va donc utiliser ces investissements-là. Donc il y aura un certain nombre des taxations qui seront faites sur les importations de produits, par exemple, renouvelables, et puis un certain nombre également d'équipements, on va dire, qui seront propres au secteur du tourisme. Et puis également, donc, dans ce contexte-là, nous avons aujourd'hui identifié 9 sites particulièrement dans les différentes régions du pays, et qui vont concerner justement des investissements dans le secteur en particulier de la création et de la mise en place d'éco-lodges. Comme je l'ai dit tout à l'heure, nous avons un besoin identifié d'avoir 40 000 chambres de plus dans différentes catégories d'hébergement, on va dire. allant donc du segment on va dire, d'hébergement de luxe vers des hébergements donc standard normal. Et donc, je ne pense pas qu'on ait le temps de présenter chacun de ces projets, mais dans tous les cas, ils sont déjà disponibles sur le site de l'EDIBM. Mais pour vous citer à titre d'exemple aujourd'hui, les principaux ambassadeurs que nous on a à Madagascar qui nous ont rejoints depuis les 5 dernières années. Alors le groupe, notamment le groupe Accor qui continue d'investir à Madagascar aujourd'hui. Nous avons Time and Tide également qui est venu il y a quelques années et qui ont renforcé leurs actions après la pandémie. Et pas plus tard que l'année dernière, donc il y a eu le lancement de l'installation et le lancement du chaîne Radisson, de la chaîne touristique Radisson à Madagascar depuis l'année dernière. Donc nous continuons dans cette promotion justement du secteur touristique, mais également des services qui vont autour de ce secteur touristique, qui sont très diverses et que nous proposons de partager à qui de droit par rapport à ces différents projets d'investissement pour le pays. Merci.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you so much. There are so many incentives, but what I highlighted the most is the 44,000 jobs that you want to create, if that's right, that I got. Ms. Diana, the same question, but if you can punctualize, like, what are the main projects that you are promoting to attract investors in your country?
Très bien, merci. Vous m'entendez? Oui, c'est bon. Donc, on continue sur le français, n'est-ce pas? Les projets principaux. Déjà, il faut savoir qu'il y a quand même des hôtels de renom qui se sont installés. La population guinéenne est jeune, donc en fait, il y a un besoin en termes de construction de nouveaux hôtels, des grands groupes, par exemple Sheraton Grand Hôtel qui s'est installé en Guinée, c'est le seul en Afrique de l'Ouest, il est en rénovation actuellement, donc il a une clientèle quand même il est très sollicité. Il y a d'autres groupes qui sont aussi en Guinée, sans leur faire de pub bien sûr. Nous sommes aujourd'hui à un niveau d'investissement de 400 millions de dollars. Et ces investissements concernent beaucoup la construction de nouveaux sites, mais aussi la rénovation et la réhabilitation des sites touristiques. Mais nous, en termes de projets, bien sûr, j'ai dit que la population guinéenne est jeune, donc des sites de loisirs, des parcs d'attractions, sont en fait des projets vraiment sur lesquels, là, on est en train de préparer le Guinea Investment Forum qui se tiendra en 2024. Donc, nous mettons un jour les catalogues de projets et le tourisme, bien sûr, n'est pas en deçà avec des projets de parcs d'attractions, de grands sites de loisirs, puisqu'on a des îles vierges qui ont besoin justement d'être réhabilitées ou en tout cas avec des constructions de bâtiments hôteliers pour être plus facilement accessibles. Mais comme l'a dit Madame, au niveau de l'Inde, les projets ne manquent pas, mais c'est la méconnaissance. Et cette méconnaissance, justement, nous y travaillons à travers, justement, même en Guinée, partir dans d'autres pays. Pourquoi ne pas rester chez nous, connaître notre pays? Donc, on travaille vraiment sur le digital, la digitalisation, faire connaître, prendre des photos. On sera les meilleurs, en fait, porteurs, finalement, de promotion, nous les Guinéens, et tous les sites aujourd'hui sont identifiés, en tout cas la plupart. Les photos en fait permettent même de visualiser, quand on les voit on se dit waouh, on a de quoi faire. Donc pour moi aujourd'hui au niveau de l'agence, c'est capitaliser en termes d'image, en termes de connaissances de la Guinée au-delà des mines, au-delà des autres secteurs. Les infrastructures sont en construction, les routes, vous l'avez dit, l'énergie, surtout l'énergie solaire. Nous avons quand même un climat où on a un ensoleillement qui est très fort avec les plages qui sont de sable fin. Donc, on a tout pour être un grand pays touristique. Maintenant, il n'y a plus qu'à le rendre connaître, le faire connaître des autres, des investisseurs, mais aussi des touristes, pour que justement la dynamique se fasse. Et je suis convaincue que les prochaines années seront vraiment une destination, la Guinée sera une destination pour les touristes du monde entier et bien sûr pour les investisseurs à travers un climat des affaires favorable. Je ne vais pas revenir sur les différents éléments pour l'attraction des investisseurs, mais juste quand même, on a un code des investissements qui apporte des avantages douaniers et fiscaux et qui permettent justement à un investisseur d'être sécurisé dans le cadre de son investissement en Guinée. On a aujourd'hui des grands groupes miniers qui sont là, qui sont sécurisés, donc pourquoi pas aussi dans le tourisme. Donc on a tout pour assurer des investisseurs. Merci beaucoup.
Perfect. This is interesting. There is also you mentioned several incentives and several projects. What I highlighted here is the retrofitting model that you have. And this is important. I want to bring your attention here because there is a lot of funds that they are working not just with ESG incentives and frameworks, and they started working with retrofitting programs. They are already taking advantage of the hotels that are already established, even in a small destination. And there's a program that we partner with IFC called Green Hotel Revitalization, for instance. And what we do is to identify infrastructure that already exists, like these brownfield projects, and then they retrofit it, and they have like a vehicle for investment. So that's a nice way to create like a way to get some investors and then start building up on top of that. And you can increase the awareness of your country as a friendly environment to attract more investors. That's a really good point, and also advertising of our project. Last but not least, Sarah, just to close up, thanks so much for your patience and to stick with us. What can we do with these countries? Like, how can we facilitate your life as an investor? You know, because everybody talks about the classics, right? The value proposition, the incentives, the frameworks, the branding that is very, very important. But at the end of the day, from an investor perspective, there is the demand, right? If there is no demand for the destination, why should I invest on your destination, right? But also the second piece, which is related with the profitability, right? How are we going to recover the capital, you know? So, but from your end, since you are like an impact investment kind of like a structure, how can we help you to go and invest in these countries?
Yeah, I think I'll say again that, can you hear me? Okay. I'll say again that our foundation is a bit of an atypical investor, so we might be looking at different things than maybe traditional investors. The first thing I'll mention is a real commitment to the Sustainable Development Goals because they're just so integrated in terms of the entire sustainability of the country and the viability of economic growth and how that will happen. More specifically, and I don't know that I have necessarily very concrete measures, but a few things I'll highlight. Just in terms of government commitments and policies around, for example, women's empowerment is absolutely huge, and also the intersection of that with entrepreneurship. So how are you cultivating that entrepreneurial ecosystem to help, you know, future founders start and grow their businesses? And then the last thing I'll mention is specifically around youth and education. So according to projections that I was seeing, 1 in 5 youth by 2030 will be born in a lesser developed country. So that's absolutely massive. And so how are we going to engage the rising generation? How will we expose them to entrepreneurship? Again, education and training around these transitions that we're seeing in the world to sustainability. So I think those are some factors that would be very beneficial to see in prospective investment countries. And then as well, you know, we all know the security development nexus. So just the presence of peace in terms of risk mitigation is always important as well. And I think, again, I'm speaking from an atypical perspective, but really looking at, for us, what our capital could do in terms of economic, social, and environmental impact. So how could jobs be created through an investment? How is the government committed, again, to job creation? So I think, you know, tying back to a lot of what my co-panelists mentioned of their priorities, I think that's very aligned from an investor's perspective. And as you mentioned, Miguel, just friendliness to investors and potential for collaboration, to co-invest, willingness to explore blended finance, all of those things, yeah.
Thanks. Taking notes. Just to wrap up, I hope you agree with these conclusions. There is like a big framework for the UN based on the people, planet, and prosperity, and it's basically related to the humans, like we all are. And for me personally, talking about the branding, just to close up, is about the storytelling, right? What is the narrative that we want to create from our countries? Because it's really hard to promote something that you don't love, right? And that's something sometimes we forget to mention. And then the other big piece from an investment perspective is the governance. And this sounds really broad and ambiguous, but it's really key when you are preparing this framework. Sometimes the IPAs or the investment bureaus or the Ministry of Tourism or different other ministers, they don't see the whole big picture and they don't work in a clear way with a clear mandate. So that is why the work of WIPA or UNTAC or these other organizations that are here present will have this knowledge to help you for the countries to promote this better. Because one piece is the incentives, right? The other piece is the demand as well. So the other key insight for me is these new financial instruments that has to be based on the value proposition for your country. Yeah, most of these countries, I mean, after you share with me, I want to go to your countries. It sounds so beautiful, and I wasn't lucky enough to go, but when I see the pictures, it's just amazing, the natural resources that you have. But I think we are still missing these financial instruments, you know, and to go deeper on that, because there is a huge, huge opportunity on that. And if you are able, or if we all are able to create these narratives in terms of ESG, on impact, as you were mentioned now, I think there's a huge chance that we can actually use tourism as a platform to diversify our economies. And the last point is the talent, right? You mentioned this new generation, and sometimes we forget about that piece, and we use tourism as one of the lowest skills and the easiest sector with the lowest barriers of entrance. But we need to actually improve that. We need to create jobs of quality that are not just I mean, even the managers. Sometimes you want to create a firm or like a big brand like Radisson, but there is not enough managers who could run the hotels, right? So that is also some conversations that we need to talk about, right? So thank you so much for your patience, and thank you so much for allowing me to share this panel. Appreciate it. Thanks.